As mentioned, I work at this place called SciTech. We're a defense contractor. We have got this enormous project going on. It's the biggest thing the company's ever done. I'm the senior software developer on the whole. I'm responsible for the software for the whole thing. Scares the hell out of me. So among other things, that means that I'm in charge of making sure that the code quality is good. And as it turns out on this one, the customer gets the code. So it isn't just for internal reasons. Part of the contract is that we have to deliver good maintainable code for something that is in principle going to last forever. So how do you do that? So I'm the guy who writes the coding guidelines and the style guides and all that stuff. But I'm also the guy in charge of making sure that people follow all those rules and know about those rules. And I did mention how many people we've been hiring recently. It's a little bit of a challenge. The phrase herding cats comes to mind. So I'm looking for coding guidelines, things to put in the coding guidelines that not only are correct and we want people to do, but that are easy to get people to do. So this is the one I found so far that might be the most useful one. There's a question mark there, but we'll see. So I first want to start with the most popular conference talk ever, probably the most popular talk in the C++ community, Sean Parrott's C++ seasoning from way back at Going Native 2013. This is the one where when everyone makes jokes about everything is standard rotate, that's the talk, all right? Everyone should know this talk. Now, there is a better version. Programming Conversations is a series of classes Alex Stepanov gave at Amazon a while back. It's one of the last things he did before he retired. I see a couple of you nodding. You know about these. They're great. You should go watch them in general. But Lecture 5, Part 1, he invited Sean Parrott to come give this talk, the same talk. And this is the better version because it's got the punchline. So just you should know that this one exists. Pardon me. Now, what is all this about raw loops? So Sean's definition of a raw loop is a loop where the body is longer than the composition of two functions. This is his example. My colloquial version of that is it's any loop with more than 2 lines of code. Maybe you get one conditional in there. You can write if in there, maybe. Maybe you get a break or continue, but probably not. If it's got more than that, it's a raw loop. Now, the other side of that definition is it's any loop inside a function where the function serves a purpose larger than the algorithm implemented in the loop. What Sean is trying to do, and what his talk is about, he's got this enormous, god-awful bunch of code that turns out to be like lower bound in a couple of standard rotates. That's the point, all right? He's trying to get people to A, stop writing loops and use standard algorithms, or B, if there is no standard algorithm, take your loop and make it into an algorithm, because it is. It's doing something. Pull it out, give it its own name, give it a nice interface. That's the point of his talk. And where I pick up is that he says, if you want to improve the code quality in your organization, replace all of your coding guidelines with one goal: no raw loops. And I have actually done this, and I have to say it works. Get rid of all your loops, write them in terms of some fundamental operation. It's beautiful. All right, now the problem is that you can't automate this. You can't put this in a CI pipeline. I can write this in my coding guidelines, but so what, right? People just go do what they're going to do. So I've found a good substitute, or more or less the same thing. Because what he's really telling people to do is refactor your code, make things shorter, and give things good names. So where I pick up is that you can consider using a code complexity analysis tool. I'm really fond of this thing. It's called Lizard. Just pip install Lizard. I don't know why I think it's so funny. I just think this thing is hilarious. Lovely little thing to play with. And what it does is it knows about all kinds of different languages. You run it on your code base, and for every function it finds, it'll compute all these statistics for you. Source lines of code, cyclomatic complexity, this, that, the other. And then what it does at the bottom is you can set some limits, and it gives you the list of everything that exceeds those limits. So on the project I was in charge of before this enormous thing I'm doing now, oh, well, actually, first, here's an example of some Lizard output. This is, I ran this on Google benchmark, because I happen to have it lying around. So up at the top, you can see there's some list of functions with numbers of nlock, how many lines of code does it have? Those are sort of logical lines. Cyclomatic complexity, how many tokens, how parameters it has, all this stuff. It'll do the same thing for every file in your code base. And then down at the bottom, it gives you the warnings. Here's all the ones that exceed your limits. So this is a cute little tool. I just like it. Here's the point. On this project I was in charge of before this, once we got to the point where we sort of had things working and could worry about some of this stuff, we added Lizard to our CI pipeline. This wasn't a huge code base, and it wasn't one with a lot of complexity, but it had some long stuff in it. So we set up Lizard so that if it found anything that exceeded our limits, it would fail the CI pipeline. And so we started off, and I set it at 100 lines of code. And it found a couple of things, and some people complained, but then we fixed it, right? And you refactor it, and you find ways to break it into other functions, and we like the result. So then I turned it down to about 60. Okay, that was a little bit more pain, but it's not too bad. You can break these in. And typically when you're breaking up these functions, they end up making multiple functions like 15 or 20 lines of code. They're nice and short and sweet. So then I turned it down to 40. Now this ended up causing some problems because everything in the code base could actually be made into something less than 40 lines of code by refactoring, except main. We had 5 or 6 different apps, and all the mains were just stuck at between 40 and 50 lines of code. Because main, right, you have to, you read your configuration file, you have to parse your command line parameters, you set up your intra-thread queues, you fire off your threads, you do the thing, you have to join it, right? They get long, all right? So at this point, you know what, we'd gotten a lot out of this. This had really cleaned our code up a lot. I handed it over to a friend of mine, and then went to work on the thing I'm doing now. He turned it down to 30 and made it stick. He got mad and said, damn it, we're doing this. So he spent some time and figured out how to actually make everything, including all the mains and the stuff, less than 30 lines of code, no suppressions. And it took him, a month or two later, he asked me to come down and look at it, and I have to say the code was gorgeous. Now, he's a good developer, okay, so I mean, that helps. But having re-architected things so that he could move stuff out of main and the long functions, the results were great, all right? And you can enforce it in a CI pipeline. Now, reliable sources tell me that 15 is possible and excellent. Among those sources, now you may be skeptical, among those people is Alan Holub. He's got a lot of talks online. He's a big guy in the Agile community. There are other people who have said this too. I don't have a link to this. I couldn't find the link, but I've heard this from more than one person. I haven't done it personally. Later on this year, I'm going to start up at the top and we'll start working our way down, and I'll let you know how far I get. But I'm just going to point out, if you are in charge of this kind of thing, if you're worried about not just code quality, but what rules you put in place to keep your code quality high, I'm just saying that a really good way to go about that, take me to your Lizard. Thanks. Question, real quick. That is a more logical, like semicolons-y thing. There's another one where it'll just tell you how many physical lines there are, and you could try squashing that too. I didn't want to penalize people for having good comments, but yeah. And it's very likely that other projects would hit CCN limits rather than how long it is. Like it's short, but it's a god-awful thing with a bunch of nested loops and crap. So, up to you.